Well, hello, our fellow friends, our fellow neighbors, and our fellow shining stars. Our next trolley stop is here, and our next trolley stop is now. Welcome back to another all-new episode of PR from the Heart's Children's Book Spotlight Series. To be precise, we have reached episode number 216. That is the 216th trolley stop here at the Children's Book Spotlight Series, here at PR from the Heart, as part of our 10-year anniversary celebration and our summer reading season. We hope that all of you, wherever you are, wherever you may be, are currently enjoying your summer. In the process, we're really excited about this particular trolley stop for several reasons. Number one, it's hard to believe, but it kind of feels like we're almost in the seventh inning stretch of the summer. I know you're probably saying, John, yes, summer just started a few weeks ago, but we're already at the middle of July, which is hard to believe. So you can feel the energy of the seventh inning stretch. And since day one of the things that we have been strong proponents of here at the Children's Book Spotlight Series and at PR from the Heart is doing our part to be able to teach our children, us as parents and caregivers and custodians of our little ones, to be able to teach our children the right thing. And especially in this particular day and age, we still kind of live in a society of what's in it for me, or let me focus on myself before I focus on other people. We live in a society where there's also a mental health pandemic in many respects that is epidemic that is continuing past the pandemic. And this has really impacted our children quite a bit. When we grew up as kids, we had our own things that we were moving through, but now kids have even that much more that they're moving through. Kids are very sensitive beings in the process. And so it's imperative now more than ever before that we do our part to teach our children to do the right thing. One of my former friends and colleagues a long time ago, Steve Shupp, little shout out to Steve Shupp. He would use the initials DWR. He told me this regularly every day. And he said, John, you know what DWR stands for? Do what's right. So if there's any one thing I should say in three letters that you take away from this particular trolley stop, that is episode number 216 of the Children's Book Spotlight Series, it's those three letters, DWR. And leave it to a brand new children's book to help us encapsulate truly what that is, especially when it comes to passing this on, to teaching this and passing this on to our children. And of course, literally, depending upon whenever you are watching this Children's Book Spotlight Series episode, especially if you are watching it on our premiere day, it's very fitting because the Major League Baseball All-Star Game is not only just on the horizon, it's literally almost here. And a very special ceremony is also happening in the next several days. You'll see by paying more attention to this particular Children's Book Spotlight Series episode how things are all coming full circle and why I keep saying the seventh inning stretch. We encourage all of you, our listeners and viewers, our friends and neighbors, and of course our fellow shining stars, to head on over to Amazon.com if that is your preferred online vehicle of your choosing, and you can purchase your copy of The Right Thing to Do, the Joe Mauer story. It is currently available. One of the many ways that you can pledge your support for our featured guest here on this week's episode of the Children's Book Spotlight Series is to leave a 5-star review for The Right Thing to Do, the Joe Mauer story. That will let Joe Schmit and Joe Mauer let them know that they're doing wonderful and much needed work for children, parents, families, educators, and for those who love great children's books. The trolley is going to be racking up some mileage, traveling across 2 time zones, San Diego, all the way to the beautiful city of Minneapolis that I still have never been to. Hard to believe, but now I think I actually have a reason to do so. But we're doing this within our imaginations and within our minds. Joining us as our featured guest here on episode number 216 of the Children's Book Spotlight Series, Emmy Award-Winning Broadcaster, KSTP Sports Director, and children's author, Joe Schmit. Joe, we appreciate you spending some time with myself and little Forrest here. Of course, my faithful furry friend and forever companion, my co-host here at the Children's Book Spotlight Series. We really appreciate you joining us, and congratulations to you and Joe on all of the success of the book. And this has really been a magic carpet ride in many respects.
Well, thank you, John, and I'm glad to hop on the trolley here. It should be a fun ride, as this book has been the right thing to do.
And we encourage all of you, if you were learning about Joe Mauer, if you were learning about Joe Schmit, if you're learning about the Children's Book Spotlight series for the first time, one of the many ways that you can pledge your support for both of the Joes and for the John here at the Children's Book Spotlight series is to subscribe to PR from the Heart's official YouTube channel. Join the more than 16,000 members of the PR from the Heart family that are our subscribers on YouTube, and share this very special trolley stop that you are now enjoying. If you're really resonating with the message of doing what's right, teaching kids right from wrong, if there's especially someone who needs to be able to hear this message during this very sensitive time, be sure to be able to share this very special trolley stop. That is episode number 216 of the Children's Book Spotlight series. This is where several loves of mine are coming full circle, Joe, because we always are big on origin stories here at the Children's Book Spotlight series. And it's so fascinating because growing up, before I became a publicist for children's authors, I wanted to be a sportscaster. I wanted to be the next Chris Berman. So I remember growing up, and I had the little microphone and the old school, whatever they were called back in the day.
Headset,
yes. Yeah. And I was brought on the correct path, the path that was meant for me. But I have such an appreciation for what you do and what sportscasters do specifically. Before we talk about the book, because technically there's 3 origin stories with this particular book. There's Joe's story, there's your story, and that of the book. Let's start off with your origin story, because you are beloved in the Twin Cities. You've had an incredible career on your end of things, and now you're stepping into the world of children's literature, which is absolutely amazing. For those who are learning about your work for the first time, who live outside of the Twin Cities area, could you share with us really where it all began for you, and when you knew that a large part of your path, your purpose, your mission, your dharma of sorts was meant to be of service?
That's a long question and a good question, John. When I was a kid, I grew up, I was a big sports fan, and like you, I didn't want to be a sportscaster. I wanted to be a pro athlete. And when I realized I wasn't good enough to be a pro athlete, somebody told me, Joe, with your big mouth and your love of sports, you ought to be a sportscaster. And from that day on, I wanted to be a sportscaster. And my career has taken me from La Crosse, Wisconsin, where I went to school, to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, to Green Bay, Wisconsin, which was my home market, and then to Minneapolis. And I've been in Minneapolis since 1985. So I've been doing this a long time. And as the main sports anchor on the ABC affiliate in the Twin Cities, you get asked to speak at a lot of banquets, athletic banquets, Rotary clubs, Optimist, things like this, charity events. And for years, when they asked me to tell a story, I would tell the win one for a Gipper story. I would tell what it was like to be in the locker room in 87 and 91 when the Twins won the World Series, what it's like to cover a Super Bowl, things like that. And all of a sudden I realized, I was dislocating my shoulder, patting myself on the back for being at all these things. So then I turned it and I said, I have to start telling stories that resonate, stories with a purpose, stories with a reason. And I came up with an idea that I called Silent Impact. And it was my first book, which is a motivational, inspirational book that I've turned into a business as a business motivational speaker. In any way, the lead story in the book is one that I heard about a guy by the name of Joe Mauer. Now, Joe Mauer is going into the Baseball Hall of Fame, as you said, depending on when you watch this, in late July 2024. But I covered Joe since he was a sophomore in high school. Joe was simply the best high school athlete the state of Minnesota has ever produced. He was recruited by every major college football program to be their starting quarterback. He was an all-state guard in basketball, led his team to the state basketball tournament. But baseball was his best sport, and with the very first pick in the amateur baseball draft, the Minnesota Twins took Joe Mauer out of Cretin-Derham Hall High School. That's all well and good and good. But as Joe was going up, and I saw him, go from rookie league ball to major league ball to all-star games to MVP. I kept hearing this story about Joe in high school. And Joe walked a young student who was blind to the lunchroom every day to sit down at his table. And And anyway, I just thought, I kept thinking about that story because it really resonated with me. And I thought, here's the big man on campus, the coolest guy on campus. He had people asking him for his autograph when he was in high school. Like, he would play a team and the other team would come and ask him for his autograph because they knew how good he was. But of all the guys in that high school, he noticed that Mike Halley sat alone and he was blind. So Joe invited him to sit down at the lunch table. And anyway, they would walk every day from the 4th hour class to the lunchroom, arm in arm, and sit down at this lunch table. And the magic was, they found out they liked each other. They found out they had a lot in common. Mike was a big sports fan. He was sitting next to all the jocks. And Mike had never had a friend who was an athlete before, and now he was sitting at the cool table. So what I did is I used my reporting skills, because I'm a reporter at heart. I started thinking about, who else did this have an impact on? I found Mike Hawley, the young man who sat there, and Mike told me all these great things, how he was lonely, how he ate alone, until Joe invited him. All of a sudden he was at the cool table. But then I put my reporter's cap on and I found 6 guys who sat around that table every day. That's when the stories started to come in. That's when I realized this random small act of kindness and humility and compassion had a huge impact. These guys talk about it like it happened yesterday. They would say Joe would walk Mike to his next class once lunch was over. By the end of the first quarter, the guys at this table would fight over who got the privilege of walking Mike to his next class. Wednesdays was pizza day, and Mike would spill some crumbs in his clothing or some pizza sauce in his chin or his cheek. Joe would grab a napkin, wipe him off, brush him off, and get him ready for his next class. By the end of the first quarter, they were all doing this. That's what I call silent impact. So I put that in my first book. I use that in my keynote presentations, to talk about how if you're more aware and intentional with the impact you have, it makes everybody healthier, happier, more productive, and you all of a sudden will have more friends and deeper relationships than you ever wanted before. And I tell the story about Joe. Well, the story became kind of popular, and I was approached by my publisher to write a children's book. And I said, I'm not a children's author. I'm barely a motivational speaker author. And I sat down and I had breakfast with Joe and his wife, Maddie. And they had told me that they had been approached by over 20 people to write a book. And I said, Joe, this will be different for 2 reasons. Number one, I said, it's a children's book. And number two, I said, let's give all the money to charity. So we sat down and agreed at that point, the money's going to 2 charities. And Joe said, I will do it not because I want to look like I'm a hero. I will do it because it will open up conversations. It will maybe inspire people to find that person who sits alone in the lunchroom, because there are a lot of them. You talk about the mental health issues that adults have and kids have. That's where it starts. And that's exactly what this book has done. And one last thing before I turn it back to you, John. When I interviewed Joe, 20 years after he did this, I said, Joe, you look back at it, why did you do it? And Joe's answer was very simple, but yet it was profound. He said, because it was the right thing to do. Thus, the name of the book is The Right Thing to Do.
I appreciate the depth of that share. And one of the things that I really love about this story, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the story itself, the book that is that you can literally, when you feel something on a visceral level, especially with a children's book, when it really cuts to the core of your being, your spirit and your soul, I can empathize with Mike, because during certain points in time in my life, especially when I was like in 6th and 7th grade, little backstory on myself, I remember that my sister was getting picked on at the current school that we were at, and she wanted to go to a new school. And so I ended up going with her to the other school. It was a whole new group of people, and I didn't feel like I belonged. So in many respects, I felt like Mike was. And there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of children, that may even be an understatement, that are like Mike, that are the cast off, or no one necessarily understands, and they may be given labels as well too, and that necessarily doesn't help. And this is one of the things that I really love, especially about Joe, and this is my next question, is the fact that in a world where there's filled with a lot of vanity, and a lot of ego. We're just talking in the PR from the Heart Green Room about how being here in San Diego, how Tony Gwynn is so beloved, the Hall of Fame slugger, the late Hall of Fame slugger for the San Diego Padres. And in many respects with athletes, you don't necessarily, for every 10 athletes that you line up, you may have one, maybe two, maybe a couple more, with how things are trending up now. But Joe is a diamond in the rough. He really understands in many respects the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would have be done unto you. What makes Joe, especially, we're seeing him go into the Hall of Fame, the most incredible moment in his professional career. How does Joe stand apart from the pack, from all of the other athletes that you've covered and all of the athletes through the annals of time? What makes Joe stand out? Why, in many respects, using the lingo of the children's book Spotlight series, why is Joe Mauer a shining star?
One word: humility. He's the most humble superstar, successful athlete I have ever met. He takes time for everybody. He cares about other people. Joe is not a flashy guy. Some people think that he's just pretty stoic, but Joe is so deep and he takes care of other people, but it's never about him. I offered Joe a chance to co-write this book. I said, Joe, why don't you be the co-writer of the book? And he goes, no, I don't want to write the book. And I finally got out of him. He didn't want to write the book because the book makes him look good. He goes, I want to do the book for two reasons: for the charities and also for the fact that it does start the discussions. And I will tell you this, John, when we started this project, we also went to some sponsors. We now have this book donated to over 500 elementary schools. And if I could show you the letters and emails that I'm getting from principals and teachers who read this book to their kids, and then 2 days later, they're down in their lunchroom, and kids who normally ate by themselves are now sitting at the cool table. It's amazing the impact that this book and this story has had. And I think the magic of Joe is Joe just realized that we're all more alike than we are different. And even though that person might dress different, might talk different, might look different, we have a lot in common. And Joe took that risk with Mike. And of all the people in the school, I can't emphasize this enough, how big shot Joe could have been. But he didn't want to be a big shot. He just wanted to be a member of the team. And he was the one. He was the one who noticed Mike was eating by himself. I always say it becomes part of your DNA. That humility, that compassion, that watching out for others in front of yourself. And that's Joe. And he's a Hall of Fame baseball player, but he's a Hall of Fame guy too.
I can definitely feel that. I mean, having the chance to go to the website of the book, which by the way is joemauerbook.com. We keep it real and simple here at the Children's Book Spotlight series. Just really feeling the heart, the intention, the purity of Joe. And that's something that, again, you don't necessarily find not only in athletes and celebrities, but in many respects of life, so to speak. And on that related note, again, 100% of the proceeds from this book will benefit the Minnesota nonprofits Thumbs Up and the Highland Friendship Club. So again, one of the many ways that you can pledge your support, in addition to leaving a 5-star review for The Right Thing to Do, the Joe Mauer story, is by purchasing and enjoying your copies of this brand new book that we are now sharing here in episode number 216 of the Children's Book Spotlight series. Again, for those of you who are you kind of slid that fast forward button, you're at the right spot, but you should still go back to what it is that we had just shared. Some really heartfelt stuff that Joe Schmit and I are sharing here on episode number 216 of the Children's Book Spotlight series. We have already begun to crack the cover and dive into the pages of The Right Thing to Do, the Joe Mauer story. It is now available. Again, you can head on over to Amazon.com, to joemauerbook.com, or if you find yourself in Cooperstown, you can purchase the book at their gift store. Like, how super sweet is that? Again, be sure to leave a 5-star review. That's one of the many ways that you can pledge your support for Joe Schmit, for Joe Mauer, to let them know that they're doing wonderful and much needed work for children, parents, families, educators, and for those who love great children's books. In life, we always overcome things. You had mentioned the Mike, who, of course, Joe became really good friends with, one of the characters in this story. In many respects, we have challenges, difficulties, obstacles, problems, stressors, troubles, worries. So it's very easy to look at you and your career, and then the same thing with Joe Mauer, and say, the Joes haven't made in the shade, right? You know, you have the secret to the fountain of youth, that you have the golden toilet, so to speak, right? But we all move through some kind of challenge in life, specifically in terms of your career, in Joe's career. Even when it comes to creating this book, what are some of the specific challenges and difficulties of note that you experienced along your path? And what were some of the things that helped you to get through to the other side in the process?
Well, I've always been motivated by, people who do great things. I lost my father at a young age. I was 25 when my father died. And, in a strange way, what that did was motivate me to spend the rest of my life trying to make my father proud of me. I don't know how that happened, but that was what I did. And then seriously, along the way, I realized that you can be kind of selfish and help others. And here's why. Listen to me out of this bunch for a second, John. When you give of yourself, you get so much in return. When you spend time on charities, when you give of your time, your treasures, your talent, whatever it is, you get so much in return that sometimes I think I'm being selfish by trying to give things to others, and because so many great things happen because of it. And I think that's exactly what Joe has realized, and I think that's exactly one of the keys to happiness and fulfillment. And you realize, there's a lot of times we all have bad days and things go wrong. Career-wise things go wrong, family-wise things go wrong. And if you're ever feeling really bad about yourself, the mistake most people make is they do something good for themselves. They treat themselves. That's the wrong way to do it. If you're feeling bad about yourself, do something good for somebody else, and guess what? You will feel better. That's the way it works. So it's a very easy secret, but I think sometimes we forget that, especially in today's day and age with social media, and there's a lot of selfishness out there. There's a lot of entitlement out there. And the more you can do not to be selfish and entitled, the happier you're going to be.
I'm really glad that you touched upon that, because as I had alluded to when we began our conversation is that, in many respects, society for some time always wants us to believe the fact that, you got to worry about yourself, and you have to be able to love yourself, and you have to be kind to yourself. There's a huge difference between, the ego and the vanity and loving and nurturing yourself, because one of the many parallels, by the way, I'm a huge proponent and big fan of Mr. Rogers and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. There are so many universal themes to the messages of kindness and compassion and empathy and doing the right thing. And it's kind of like, that you and Joe are like Minnesota's versions of Fred Rogers, and in your own way, keeping the memory and the legacy alive of Fred while blazing your own trail. But it's so important to remember, as you said, that when you take the time to do something for someone else, for one thing, whatever challenge or difficulty that you're moving through, it kind of like temporarily disappears. It's like it's not even on the radar, and you're fully immersed in service. And when you take the time to focus on the we, it's so interesting how the me is always taken care of, right? And this is one of the things that I when I communicate with children's authors, especially because it's a very large industry right now, and it's a very saturated industry. And a lot of children's authors, what do I need to do to be successful? And one of the things that I always let those authors know is always focus on service and being kind to other people along the way, because things just have a wonderful way of working themselves out. If you've ever been to Australia, Joe, you know about the boomerang, and you throw the boomerang the right way, and it eventually makes its way back out on over to you. Specifically speaking, the story itself, now diving into the pages fully of The Right Thing to Do, the Joe Mauer story, it obviously chronicles the story of Joe and Mike, but it goes even that much deeper in the process in a very simplified, heartfelt way. We never like to give away the whole kit and caboodle. That's an old school expression that we like to say here in the Children's Book Spotlight series. For those who want a little bit of a glimpse of the story without, learning about the full thing from beginning to end, what are some of the other things? I know that there's one other facet of the story, specifically in terms of the overall arc, that Joe not only helps out Mike, but he helps out someone named Andre along the way as well.
Yep. Andre was the guy who always got picked last. And it was interesting, just to step back a little bit, John, when you said that you were the lonely guy sometimes, or you were the guy who maybe wasn't invited to the party. I can't tell you how many times I'll do a book reading or a keynote presentation, and it can be CEOs of companies, and they'll come up to me and say, I was Mike. I ate by myself. I was the guy who got picked on. Or I was Andre, the guy who was picked last. Well, Joe would always be one of the captains, right, to pick the team, and Joe would pick Andre first. And the story goes that, why did you pick Andre first? Everybody's complaining, Andre can't catch, Andre can't play. Well, Joe taught Andre how to catch, and Joe took the time. And Joe just, once again, was compassionate, and it made this huge impact. And he kind of learned a lesson from his father. You know, as Joe and I have a little bit in common too, in that, you know, Joe lost his father about a year and a half ago. So here he's having the biggest moment of his life, going into the Baseball Hall of Fame, and his dad won't be there. Obviously, he'll be there in spirit. But his dad was the person who taught him the lessons of doing the right thing. A little excerpt in the story is about how Joe broke a neighbor's window, because he hit the baseball too far. And Joe was going to run. And Dad made him go over and talk to the neighbor, pay for the window. And his dad told him, because it was the right thing to do. That stuck. And that's what I always tell people. I say, you never know when you're going to be that person who makes that impact. You never know when the person sitting next to you is going through something heavy. They're really having a bad day. They're struggling. But just by you being aware, intentional, showing them some value, letting them feel like they belong, you're going to get them through the day. That's what Joe did for Andre. That's what Joe's dad did, you know, when he told Joe, do the right thing, go talk about the broken window. So those are the lessons that kids pick up in this book. And here's the other thing. The great thing about children's literature, John, and you know this, is it's a gateway to discussions. I think a lot of times we don't talk about values with our children. We tell them what not to do. And sometimes I think, you know, and as a parent, we all get busy. And we all have our careers, and we all get crazy. And I look back and wish I had a lot of moments over, believe me. I have 3 children who are all now grown adults. But take time to talk about values and why they're important, and then have the kids share why it's important to them, or examples that they've seen or that they've used. And quite frankly, as a parent, if you see something that they do, if you see something that your kids do of value, you know, being this example, boy, get out there and start patting them on the back and start praising them, because that's what they need.
I'm glad that you really hit home on that as well too, because children's books, in many respects, I still use the phrase, it's a parallel when Mr. Rogers spoke in front of Congress to secure $20 million worth of funding for PBS. When he spoke in front of Senator John Pastore, he used the phrase resource of care. He said, Senator Pastore, what I do through the neighborhood is a resource of care for children. And in many respects, you use the phrase how children's literature is a gateway to discussion. A sister terminology to that is a resource of care, because again, you know, let's say, for example, that there's a lot of parents that still are moving through unprocessed childhood trauma, or even just stuffed down emotions, and they may not necessarily know how to begin the conversation, right? We're not necessarily just talking about the birds and the bees. We're talking about like just even other kinds of subject matters. That's one of the great things about children's books. And this is one of the reasons why, as I had mentioned, and I'm going to share this publicly as well too, here is the fact that I've come across many children's books over the past 10 years, doing PR publicity work for children's authors, and many books specifically over the past 6 years with the Children's Book Spotlight Series. I'm sure you probably heard this in many respects. I wish this book were around when I was a child. We obviously can't change the past, but we can definitely blaze a trail for the future. So for all of the Mikes and for all of the Andres that are out there, they know that they're not alone. And that's one of the other subject matters that I really wanted to really hit home on, because there are children that, ranging from they don't feel special, they feel unloved, all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum where they're moving through, you know, depression, anxiety. There's even many children that feel that life is not necessarily worth living. One of the things that we really love to do here at the Children's Book Spotlight Series is to provide some useful and supportive information in the form of tips, tools, strategies, what are some of the things that we as parents and caregivers and custodians of our children can do to really let our children know that they're not alone, that they're supported now more than ever before? And in many respects, to take a page out of Mr. Rogers and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, he would always say the phrase that you're liked and that you're loved, that I like you, that I love you just the way that you are. What are some specific things that come to mind that we can do to be able to really support our children and integrate that true belief with a capital T into their minds and their hearts?
Well, I would say, when we start the discussion and the conversation, to make sure the children feel safe, that if you're gonna ask your children to be transparent and maybe talk about some weaknesses, maybe you start off with your weaknesses. Maybe you start off with a mistake you made. When I was a kid, I was not Joe Mauer. I was not the great athlete, and guess what? I was not the kid who would have invited Mike to the lunchroom. As a matter of fact, I might have been the kid that snickered and made fun of Mike, and I'm not proud of it. But then doing that, you can kind of let people know that we're all human, we all make mistakes, but we can all get better. And what are we all doing to get better? And I think also going with the philosophy that I talked about a little bit before, if you want to be happier, do things for other people and try it. I think just having those open, honest conversations without judgment, and talk about what values are important to them. And then maybe even why they like their friends. One of the exercises that I use when I speak, I came up with an idea of thinking, how can we all be more aware and intentional of the impact that we're having on other people? Well, I think what we have to do is look at who had an impact on us. If we could build our own monument to the four most impactful people in our life, if you could build your own Mount Rushmore of influence, who would you put on your personal Mount Rushmore, and why would they be there? Now, I have done this with kids because I work with high schools once in a while. So I did a leadership, 100 leaders of schools in Minnesota. I worked with them in the morning. I worked with their parents in the afternoon, and at night we brought them all back together. And in my session, I had them all fill out their Mount Rushmore of influence, who had the most impact on their life. And I make it difficult. I say you can't put your parents on the list for both the adults and the children. And at night, I had them compare their list. And by the time I was done with the presentation, I had a line of parents and a line of kids. The parents were telling me I learned more about my kids today than I ever did before. And I had kids telling me I know more about my mom and dad than I did before. But all of a sudden, that's a pretty good example. So all of a sudden, you're going to say, the reason I love Aunt Harriet is because, and guess what? I guarantee it's going to be something that she did of value. I guarantee it was an example. I guarantee you she was aware and intentional of her impact. And that's why she belongs up on your personal Mount Rushmore. And then for your kids, when you do that Mount Rushmore, you can say, why is your science teacher, Mrs. Smith, on your Mount Rushmore? And then you can find out what makes them tick a little bit. She's on because, she likes the same bands I like, or she talks a lot about her cat. Whatever the case might be, you'll find out why. And when you find out the why, you find out a lot more about your kids. And once again, it leads to the next question. When you're talking to somebody, if you're talking about weather, you're not talking deep enough. Get to know people so you can ask the next question. And that's what an exercise like Mount Rushmore will do.
I appreciate you sharing that exercise specifically to it. And that leads me into the fact of taking the time to get to know people a little bit better. And in many respects, one of the things that I feel is that, it's very easy. We live in a very judgmental society, unfortunately. If we see a child that's moving through something, we can throw them a label. And I'm a huge proponent of children's books really helping out the next generation, because the more children's books that are out there, like The Right Thing to Do, the less that children are on anxiety medications and in the chairs of therapists. There's something really healing about a children's book, because it really connects to the mind and the heart of the child, no matter wherever they're at on their path. And one of the things as well, too, is especially, again, us as adults, we have the inner child that's within us. You've already alluded to this briefly, but if you can kind of expand upon more about this. Undoubtedly, there is healing that has happened in the adults who have read this book. I tend to think that children's books, they're actually disguised as children's books, but they're actually meant for us as the grown adult big kids. What has that meant to you, knowing the fact, obviously, you're making a difference in the lives of kids, yourself and Joe, but what does it mean to you on that visceral level, knowing the fact that you're having, you know, people from all walks of life, whether it be, you know, educators or CEOs, you know, parents, grandparents, to say, like, I was able to reconnect with my inner child. I'm able to be at peace with the fifth grade part of me that got picked on. What does that mean to you, knowing the fact that what you and Joe have created is really making a deeper impact than maybe what you first thought?
Well, first of all, John, I was surprised. I did not expect this reaction. I was hoping to hear back from teachers and educators and parents saying that the lessons are great, and my son or my daughter, my grandson, granddaughter, you know, they are now using these. They love the story. They didn't even know who Joe Mauer was, but now he's their favorite player. That's what I was expecting. I was not expecting the confessions from adults talking about this story moved them because that's who they were. They were the last person picked. They were the one who sat alone at lunch. They were the one who didn't even go into the lunchroom because they didn't want to get picked on or seen, or they were heavy, so they didn't want to go and eat in front of anybody. There's a lot of pain out there that we don't know about because we all get so busy in our regular days. So some of the side byproduct of this story have been amazing. There's one story. 2 charities are getting the money to this book. 100% of the proceeds are going to Thumbs Up for Mental Health and the Highland Friendship Club. Thumbs Up for Mental Health was started by a woman in Elk River, Minnesota, who was struggling herself. She read the story in the book Silent Impact and said she had to do something. She had struggled with mental health. Her daughter was the person who ate alone at the lunchroom. She started this charity. It's a safe haven for kids in junior high and high school to come, and they work on mental health. They talk about mental health. They talk about suicide prevention. They have all kinds of services and programs that they do to help kids. And the program is spreading all over the state, and they want to roll it out nationally. And one of the programs that they have coming out of this book is a program called No One Sits Solo. And we made a video of Joe and Mike in a reunion talking about it. And it's a powerful video that you can get if you go to thumbsupformentalhealth.org. They'll be happy to share that video with you. But it's just amazing what happens. So that tells you it has a bigger impact on the adults many times than it does the children.
And the video, No One Sits Solo, is also available on joemauerbook.com as well, too. Again, we've included the link to joemauerbook.com in the description below. So you can, a very powerful story. And one of the things that I really felt as the result of watching the video is that connection is still there. There's oftentimes maybe we'll just do something, you know, right in that moment. And then maybe, you know, through our own life, you know, life takes us in different turns and paths, and you can feel that the connection is there in the recording of that video, just as it was back in, I believe, 2001, if I'm not mistaken. And I can also really empathize and connect with Joe's story because Joe and I are similar ages. So I believe he was a senior in 2001. I was a senior in 99. So again, very, you know, a lot of similar musics and things happening in the world at that particular point in time. We're beginning to wind down our time with our featured guest here on episode number 216 of the Children's Book Spotlight series, Joe Schmit. We are fully immersing ourselves in the right thing to do. It's not just the name of a children's book. You go back to what we're mentioning about Steve Shutt back in the day. If you're going to remember 3 names from this Children's Book Spotlight series, it's going to be Joe Schmit, Joe Mauer, and Steve Shutt, because you're just going to remember DWR, right? We encourage all of you, our listeners and viewers, our friends and neighbors, and of course our fellow shining stars, to head on over to joemauerbook.com. Also head on over to amazon.com if that is your preferred online vehicle of your choosing. One of the many ways you can pledge your support for both of the shows to let them know that they're doing wonderful and much needed work for children, parents, families, educators, and for those who love great children's books are to leave a 5-star review. If you head on over to your favorite local library, your favorite children's and or independent bookstore, and they do not stock their copies of The Right Thing to Do, make that kind recommendation. Let them know that you heard about The Right Thing to Do, the Joe Mauer story here on the Children's Book Spotlight series as part of our summer reading season. In many respects, Joe, life is a teacher. In many respects, even though we're past the high school age, we're past the college age, it's kind of like Earth is a school. Earth is a school, life is school. And undoubtedly, you've learned a lot along the way through the process of crafting this book, bringing it to life, and now sharing it with not only children, parents, families, educators, everyone in throughout the state of Minnesota, but across the country and around the world. What has this story and your connection with Joe, what has The Right Thing to Do and your relationship with Joe taught you about yourself and taught you about life?
It has taught me to slow down. We all get so busy, and when we get so busy, we don't take time sometimes to recognize the people we're around and just acknowledge them and let them know that they are valued. And sometimes that's just, hello, how you doing? And sometimes it's, you look nice today. Sometimes it's just letting people know you care. And that's easier said than done because we all get busy. I literally have started scheduling myself on my calendar impact time, where I spend a half hour a day talking to somebody. Maybe it's a phone call, maybe it's somebody at the office, maybe it's somebody I'm out, and just really digging into finding out what's going on in their life, making it about them instead of making it about you. You know, the secret to the entire thing is not about people liking you. That's not the secret. The secret is about people liking themselves. And if you're the person that helps make that happen, that's when the magic happens. That's when, guess what? When they have to do their Mount Rushmore, your name might pop up there yourself, because that's what happens. So I am never going to be perfect. And I think that's the first thing we all have to realize. We will never be perfect. We will all make mistakes. But if we try to make one more positive impact a day, just imagine how much relationship equity, how much friendship equity you'll have built up in a year. We all make little impacts every day, but make one more intentional impact a day. That's what I try to do. And it's really changed my life. I'm much more fulfilled. I'm much happier. I don't really care about the things that I used to care about. And I mean, you know, I'm talking about the vanity things, the looking online to see how many likes I got or something like that. It's really changed when you make it on other people. You're not going to be able to do it all the time, but if you do it a few more times, it makes a big difference.
And this is also one of the main anthems of the story as well, too, is just being kind. It's something that, you know, in many respects, we might want to focus on, you know, what I can do to impress someone and how much money is it going to cost. And kindness is free. That's the great thing about kindness. No matter wherever you're at on your path, no matter if you're man or woman, you're short, you're tall, you're blonde or blue, you can be kind, and it's free, and it can literally make someone's day. And I'm really glad that you talked about the phrase being intentional, because we can really find ourselves on autopilot amongst the tasks and the commitments and the to-dos during the course of the day. But just knowing at the end of the day, I got to share something that I feel that we're kindred spirits in many respects. But one of my dear colleagues, Ken Lewicki, I remember he's actually one of my coaches. And he had mentioned to me a while ago, he said, you know, John, I want you to take the time to celebrate more. And I said, okay, you know, further elaborate. And he said, you know, some people are big on gratitudes. Amp that up to a celebration. He said, I want you to take the time to go to Home Depot and get a bucket. And I want you to have a victory bucket. So every time there's something amazing that happens, you put that in the victory bucket. So I said, all right. When I go to Home Depot, I'm not looking for a gray colored bucket or black colored bucket. So I get myself an orange colored bucket. And oftentimes when I put things in the victory bucket, it's a matter of being able to do something kind for someone. And it also reminds me to continue to be kinder and that much more loving to myself, because the more that you pour that into yourself, the more that you can pour that back into other people. the two ways that we always close out every children's book spotlight series, and they're the first one, we always feel the presence and the spirit of Fred Rogers when we do a children's book spotlight series episode. Whenever he went across the country, outside of the context of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, talking about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, whether it be a college commencement speech, a talk at the American Library Association, whether it be his time on the neighborhood, most notably when he received his Lifetime Achievement Award at the Daytime Emmy shortly before he passed from stomach cancer. And he always kept the time, Joe, whether it be 15 seconds, 30 seconds, or a full minute. He encouraged us to remember those who helped love us into being. And that was his way of saying, remember those people that came across your path that reminded you to not only be kind and loving to yourself, but be kind and loving to other people, that helped us to remember the importance of doing the right thing. Who are some of the people that you would like to publicly recognize here on episode number 216 of the Children's Book Spotlight series that helped love you, Joe Schmit, into being?
That's a bit of a question. Before I get to it, because I don't want to forget it, we were talking about kindness. We started off with a 7th inning stretch. Here's my line on kindness. Kindness is undefeated. It's undefeated. Nobody can beat kindness. Who helped me along the way? Well, I've been lucky enough, my parents, and I talked about my father. My father had a gift, and his gift was he made everybody feel like they were his best friend. What a wonderful gift. He developed trust. My mom was the hardest working person that I know. My high school football coach, a guy by the name of Bill Collar, he's a Hall of Fame football coach in Wisconsin. I went back and gave him a second thank you. I call it the second thank you. When you go back and thank somebody years later for what they did, the impact they had in your life. And I was at the crossroads. I was either going to take my talents and go nefarious, or I was going to take my talents and go good. And in a conversation he had with me one day, he took me aside and he sat me down on the gym floor, and he just said, you're at the crossroads. And he said, you have so much potential. You can do this, this, and this. You can go to college. You can do this. And all of a sudden I realized I had somebody who believed in me that I didn't believe in myself. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And that changed my life. And then fortunately, I worked for a guy by the name of John Campbell early in my broadcasting career. John never taught me anything. But I got my master's degree from osmosis, watching a pro work, watching how he treated people, watching how he worked on his craft and what he spent his time on, and how to be a pro. And so I have a lot of those people that I go back and thank. I've been happily married for 35 years. My wife and I, we still like each other, but she taught me so many things. She's big into theater. I've gone to more theater than sporting events sometimes, but it's opened up things to me. So, I think I love your old gratitude bucket idea, and I take it one step further. When you're having that bad day and not feeling good about yourself, John, go reach in that bucket and pull a couple out. You're going to find out you're not that bad of a guy after all. That will help get you through that day. But, no, I've been very lucky, and quite frankly, I'll just end it on Joe Mauer. I knew Joe as an athlete, and I covered Joe for many years and knew he was a great guy. But now I consider, Joe a good friend. And when you have friends who have values and qualities like that, you're playing in the right ballpark.
That's true. Whether it be Target Field or whether it be Petco Park, you are playing on the right field, and that kindness is indeed undefeated. We're also huge Disney buffs at the Children's Book Spotlight series, and it's interesting because the Disney magic always helps us to remember that we have the ability to bring to form and shape our dreams, our desires, our goals, our ambitions. We have the ability to fulfill our own wishes. And when those people come across our path, whether it be family, friends, colleagues, those whom we're called to be of service to, we have the ability to help them fulfill their wishes as well. We go back to the year 1992. I believe that's when the Buffalo Bills had the Super Bowl at the Metrodome, and they lost to the Washington Redskins. Bad childhood memory, but it still was a great year in many respects, because we remember the late Robin Williams. We remember, as he voiced the genie of the lamp, we remember Disney's beloved animated classic Aladdin. We have a little segment that we like to call Three Wishes. So tried and true since day one. We've had this genie lamp come with us wherever we go. Joe, you've given freely from your heart to not only your viewers, but to now children, parents, families, educators, people across the state of Minnesota, across the country and around the world. You're very much committed to service. So this is your time to receive, Joe. So you are being given 3 wishes. Now they can be for yourself, they can be for your family, they can be for the children of the world. I think the only 2 automatic disqualifiers, as the genie of the lamp once said long ago, is that you can't ask for more wishes and you can't make someone fall in love with you, but anything else is fair game. So what would your 3 wishes be, Joe?
That's really good. Okay, my first wish would be that more children get their hands on this book, whether parents, grandparents can get it to them through libraries. We have a program, people can buy books and we make sure they get to schools. So I think the more people that would get this book, the better our world would be. The second one I think would be just personally that I continue to challenge myself to do the right thing, and that I take time to be aware and intentional, and that I'm also kind to myself when I don't, when we fail, and realize that, this too shall pass. We can all move on. And then I think the third wish would be that we live in such a divisive world right now. And I'm not trying to get political or anything, but I just wish people would look for the commonality that we have. We're a lot closer together than we are apart. We're a lot more alike than we are different. And I just wish that we wouldn't live in a world where it is so divisive and unfriendly and unforgiving, and just sometimes just have people be more compassionate.
And again, those are really the keys and the crux to having a beautiful life for not only yourself, but for those people that are in your life, family, friends, colleagues. And again, you never know where someone currently is at on their path. And this goes back to the thread of the intentionality, is the fact that when you see someone that is struggling, you can simply even smile to someone. You don't necessarily know what that smile, what that handshake, what that hug, what that, believe in yourself. It may seem cheesy on the surface when you share it, but you never know how that may actually transform someone's day and maybe even change their life. When we hear the trolley, that means that it is time to go. But raise your hand if you have had fun on episode number 216 of the Children's Book Spotlight series. We see hands from myself, we see hands from Joe, we see hands from the little ones on screen. As we like to say, that means mission accomplished, job well done. One of the fastest growing endorsements, by the way, in the world of children's literature. It's akin to, if you remember back in the day when Siskel and Ebert, when they reviewed movies and they loved movies, they gave it 2 thumbs up. Well, my pride and joy, my little Shih Tzu Maltese, who's going to be turning 2 in just a few short weeks, we take the time to read children's books regularly. And when little Forrest loves a children's book, he gives it 2 paws up, and he is not only giving the right thing to do 2 paws up, but 2 proud paws up. This is actually one of his favorite stories that he's had the chance to read with me. So again, if you need a little bit more of a further endorsement, little Forrest again gives 2 paws up for the right thing to do, the Joe Mauer story. We hope that this story that we've discussed, the right thing to do, the Joe Mauer story, we hope that it's inspired you, that it's lifted your spirits. Indeed, if it has done that for you, put that ripple effect out into the world. One of the many ways, again, that you can pledge your support for Joe Schmit and for Joe Mauer, as well as this beautiful story, The Right Thing to Do. Subscribe to PR from the Heart's official YouTube channel. Share this very special trolley stop that you have been enjoying. That is episode number 216 of the Children's Book Spotlight series on your favorite social media platforms. But fear not, there are many more magical trolley stops to come. It's been really cool, actually, and one of the things that I didn't have the chance to mention here, Joe, but it's so fascinating how there are people that are utilizing their platforms for the highest and greatest good in the world of television. We've had the opportunity to interview Craig Melvin from the Today Show, Paige Halsey, who is a great anchor out, I believe, the CBS affiliate or the NBC affiliate in St. Louis. She has a great new children's book called Bad Day Fishing, and just great stories. So I'm really glad to see that, people that are on television are utilizing their platforms for the highest and greatest good. But there are many more magical trolley stops to come because we are fully immersed in our summer reading season. And then sooner than we realize that we're going to be heading into the back to school season, as well as the holiday season. But this is all a part of our 10-year anniversary celebration here at PR from the Heart. If you are a children's author, if you are a middle grade author, would love to share your inspiring story, just as Joe Schmit did here this week on the Children's Book Spotlight Series. If you'd like to be a featured guest here on the program, we encourage you to head on over to our official website. That is prfromtheheart.com, or connect with us via any of our social media platforms that you now see on screen. Instagram, Facebook, and X, all at PR from the Heart. We mentioned Mr. Rogers, and one of the many ways that we keep the memory and the legacy of Mr. Rogers alive and well is through the Neighborly Reviews bookcast. You remember him and you love him as the beloved Mr. McFeely on the popular long-running children's television program, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. David Newell joins us each and every month here for the sister program of the Children's Book Spotlight Series, the Neighborly Reviews bookcast, where we deliver heartfelt reviews from the newest children's books that are available from the shining stars in the world of children's literature. So if you were a children's author and would love to have David and I deliver a new heartfelt review of your brand new children's book on a forthcoming edition of the Neighborly Reviews bookcast, you know where to connect with us. And Joe talked about being of service. It has been such a privilege over the past decade to be of service to some of the top names in the world of children's literature, such as John Parra, Catherine Roy, the legendary Sharon Lois, and Bram Skinnamarink-Dinky-Dink, Skinnamarink-Doo. It's a reminder that we love you, by the way. And of course, those children's authors whose journeys are just taking flight, especially with the back-to-school season now here and the holiday season, and authors are making their plans for 2025. We are so privileged to be of service to you, and we are privileged to be of service to many of you in the future. If you were a children's author and are looking for dedicated PR publicity to support to create your own book media tour or a national book media tour, head on over to our official website, prfromtheheart.com. And again, let us see how we can be of service to you. One final time, we wholeheartedly encourage you to head on over to joemauerbook.com and amazon.com. Be sure to leave a 5-star review for The Right Thing to Do, the Joe Mauer story. That's just one of the many ways that you can pledge your support for Joe Schmit and for Joe Mauer, letting them know that they're doing wonderful and much needed work for children, parents, families, educators, and for those who love great children's books. If you head on over to your favorite local library, your favorite children's and or independent bookstore, and they do not stock their copies of The Right Thing to Do, the Joe Mauer story, make that kind recommendation, that little tip of the cap, let them know that you heard about The Right Thing to Do here on episode number 216 of the Children's Book Spotlight Series. And again, you can also make a donation as well. This is one of the things we wanted to mention before we put the finishing touches on episode number 216 of the Children's Book Spotlight Series. By going to joemauerbook.com, you can actually make a donation at an all-star level, a triple level, home run level, or a grand slam level. So if you want to do your part to be able to get more copies of this great children's book, this empowering read, into the hands and the hearts of children all across the country, again, you can head on over to joemauerbook.com under the donate section. And again, you can make a donation. As we like to say here at the Children's Book Spotlight Series and PR from the Heart, no donation is too large, no donation is too small. And that's why there is also the option of donation. Pay what you can. Again, 100% of the proceeds of this story benefit Thumbs Up as well as the Highland Friendship Club. More information on both organizations are available at joemauerbook.com. But again, when we hear the trolley, that means that it is time to go. But we want to thank all of you for your continued support of PR from the Heart, for your continued support of the Children's Book Spotlight Series, for your continued support of children's authors and illustrators such as Joe Schmit, who again are doing wonderful and much needed work for children, parents, families, educators, and for those who love great children's books, for the pillars of our community, local libraries and children's and independent bookstores. Above all else, we want to thank you for helping us to walk home the children of the world. One final tip of the cap. We've again felt his spirit throughout the course of this episode, even more so than ever before. And that's a good thing. In many respects, if you remember Mr. Rogers, when he was on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, in his own way, shape, and form, in his own private numerology, he reminded us of our inherent worth and our inherent value. Did you know that Mr. Rogers weighed 143 pounds for his entire natural adult life while walking this earthly plane. As we like to say, he might have met Ponce de Leon in a past life, because that's sure as heck the fountain of youth, right? That and amongst the swimming that he did each and every day on his end of things. But it's interesting because there's 1 letter in I, 4 letters in love, 3 letters in you. So it's a little tip of the cap to Mr. Rogers. And as Joe and his little Forrest were both kind enough to spend some quality time with us here in our neighborhood, and as a little tip of the cap to Mr. Rogers, we share our favorite 3 numbers in closing. That is 243. There is 2 letters in we, 4 letters in love, 3 letters in you. That is our reminder that we see you just the way that you are, that we like you, we love you just the way that you are whole, that you are healthy, that you are complete, that you are loved, that you are special just the way that you are, that we like you and we love you just the way that you are. There's a lot of magic happening here at PR from the Heart, even more magic happening with the Children's Book Spotlight series. We hope that you have enjoyed episode number 216 of the Children's Book Spotlight series and all of the many more programs that are to come as well too. This is a great way to continue our 10-year anniversary celebration. So for Joe Schmit, for Little Forrest, for myself, John Masiulionis, thank you for spending some quality time with us here in our neighborhood. Enjoy the All-Star game. Enjoy the Hall of Fame festivities if you're heading out to Cooperstown, or if you are just continuing to do the right thing each and every day. You are a Hall of Famer in your own book. That's for sure. Thank you for helping us to walk home the children of the world, our fellow friends, our fellow neighbors, and our fellow shining stars. Goodbye for now.